your sales reps are losing to the same objection every time, and you're coaching on whatever went wrong this week. I don't guess why deals die. I pull a report. This is the objection prevention system that I run inside of 8-figure sales teams, rank every objection by count and by rep, and then we kill the top ones upstream before they ever reach the close. Let's get into it. Here's what I call the founder trap. Everything is handled one call at a time. Whatever's on fire is what we're putting out. A high performance team is one that never stops finding what to fix. Most sales teams stop looking a long time ago, right? So here's the reality. Whichever call blew up this week is what gets the attention. The pattern underneath never does. And so what we see is that founders and managers are coaching on the loudest loss, the biggest fire, not the most common one. All right. The second thing that we see a lot is the deal is dying at the close and the objection never gets handled. So the rep hears, let me think about it. It says, no problem, books a follow-up. And they never actually identify why there's a delay. And there goes the 20K, 30K deal. And then the last thing that happens very often in 7 and 8-figure teams that I audit is that the training goes stale. There's no training cadence, or the training becomes very boring and redundant. And the reps are not excited to show up to meetings. They essentially stop coming, or they come late, or it just kind of builds the team morale, right? And the reason is because the training isn't relevant to what they're dealing with in the moment, so it doesn't feel important. So typically what I see on sales teams is the same 3 to 5 objections is what's killing every single deal every month, but nobody can actually, with numbers, with data, say, this is exactly what's killing our deals, right? All right, so here's an example of a client sales floor, an 8-figure sales team that I work with, and I pulled 30 days of closing calls, and every objection is tallied and ranked by count, right? So if you see here, the number one objection that we were seeing is a timeline too far out, which means low urgency. There's 33 instances of this. The second most popular objection that we're hitting is needs to consult with spouse or partner. It's just very single-threaded at the close. We haven't identified the decision makers earlier on the call. This happened 32 times. And then the third most frequent objection that we saw is the site prep is not ready. They need to consult with a contractor. They need to have foundation. There's items that they need to do in order to be prepared to purchase. And so then we saw 31 instances of this, right? So this isn't a hunch. This is a report. And so now that we know the obstacles that we're facing at the end of the call, we can start to battle them upstream and see how we can prevent them, do some objection prevention. So here's the objection prevention system that I install. This can be manual or this can be automated. It's the same loop regardless, right? So if you understand it, you can install this totally by hand. So the first and foremost, and I've mentioned this a lot before, is we do end of a day reports. Every single rep breaks down every single call, every single day that they're in the field, and they submit that into an end of day report. So this is their personal reflection, their opportunity for self-assessment, for self-correction, right? And then I have an agent that is inside of the Slack channel that's reading every single report that is submitted and categorizing that based off agent, and it's analyzing it. And then I also have a call review agent that is listening to every single call that our sales team is having and breaking down and analyzing the call. So then we take the objections that we're pulling from each of those 2 reports for the entire team and for each and every sales rep, and we start to rank them. And then we identify which ones are the ones that we need to drill and work on. Obviously, the ones that the majority of the team is seeing is relevant for team training. And then if there's certain objections that individual reps are seeing that they are having a harder time with, that's better for one-on-one training, right? And so the reality is what doesn't close today becomes what the team is training on tomorrow and next week and this month. And then we're rinsing, repeating this cycle as we're continuously getting better and better and better and handling these objections ahead of time. So this process is broken down into 5 steps. Step 1 is every single call gets an entry, right? So in the sales reps end of day report, every call on the calendar is included in the report and it's submitted into one channel. So we use a Slack channel for this. And if you notice, the call analysis is broken down into a couple different steps. One is the call outcome. What happened and why? What did we do well on the call, right? So we always want to positively reinforce the things that we're doing well. Where do we need to improve? What was the objection or the blocker on the call? If this didn't close, why did it not close? And what are the next steps that we put in place for this prospect? So that's the end of day report. Every single rep's doing it every single day. The second and third steps are we want to, from a management or from a founder perspective, we want to start to understand the awareness gap, right? And so our sales reps are logging what they believe the objection is. And then we pull the call recording and we have our agent analyze not just their report, but also the call recording to see what was actually said and what do we think was said and are they aligned or not, right? And so here's a couple examples that I pulled. On the left, it's what the rep wrote. Timeline is too far out. What the recording says is timeline, but only after price came up and got dodged, right? So did we miss a pricing objection and just kind of defaulted to too far out? They're not going to close. Here, the next example is needs to talk to spouse. And then if we look at the call, the spouse was never brought into the entire call discovery. And then even when we face an objection end of call, we didn't actually break down what the spouse's interest is, what they thought. We didn't have a process for the spousal objection that was implemented, right? And then site prep is not ready, the third example here. And then when we look at the call, it's accurate, very high awareness. So these are aligned. So aligned means high awareness. You want to have sales reps that are highly aware, that can self-correct, because that means less work from a management, from a founder perspective, when the reps can coach and self-assess, and then we're just overseeing and helping them look at the next steps or the blind spots that they're not seeing. If it's misaligned, then obviously there's not awareness, or the sales rep isn't taking this as serious or is being a little bit more lax. And we really want to coach on that opportunity instead of the specific missed call. It's more about the awareness. If we can teach them how to be aware, they can manage themselves, which makes our lives so much easier. So this is basically step 2 and 3, where we analyze what the rep wrote, and then we actually look at the recording and see what the agent says happened on the call, right? And then the fourth step here is we start to rank this 2 ways. We rank it by team, and then we rank it by rep, right? So same ledger, just 2 different cuts, and each one has a room that it belongs in. So by team, we're looking at top 3 objections by month by count, and it goes into Monday's training at the top of the week, and then we drill it throughout different closer trainings in the week. And then we start to create talk tracks around this objection, and then we start to identify the objection earlier on in the setting process, on the closing call, and push it into discovery so that everybody in our team is hyper aware of this objection and we can start to prevent it, right? And then we look at broken down by rep. And this is where we can work with reps one-on-one to identify what their top objections are and help them identify what they need, what they're constantly running into, why their deals are being stalled or being blocked, and then coach them on identifying the pattern as it's happening so that we can start to prevent it. So that's the 4th step. The 5th step is now we start to kill this upstream. So now that we have the system installed, we want to start to identify these objections and start to kill them upstream. So on the setting side, right? So the reality is an objection that we hear at the close was actually born earlier on in the call. And so we want to fight it where it was born. So typically the very first place is to marketing. So we can send all of this information to marketing and say, hey, we need some more education on these things before they're coming in. But from a sales team perspective, the first thing is on the setting team, right? So can we help the setting team identify what to listen for and how to start to prevent it and how to identify those obstacles before they pass the call on to the closer? And then in discovery, we have to train our reps. How can we start to pull out these objections? And if we notice, if we know what we're being blocked, we know what patterns to listen for, we can start to prevent it in discovery. Lastly is during the pitch, right? So if we know what the potential objections are, we can include them in the pitch so that we're knocking them out of the way. And then ultimately is in the close. We want to have a really tight end of call process where our team has trained and has all the relevant talk tracks that they need to handle any objection at the close. And so typically we'll do this by categorizing them into a few different categories and working and drilling each category. So handling objections is a close skill. Preventing them is a discovery skill. So we always want to be fighting the objections upstream. And ultimately, the last thing here is we drill the root cause, right? And so we take the number 1 objection for the last 3 days. We break it down as a team in this order. Why are we hearing this? What is the root cause? Not the words that we're hearing, but what is the reason, the root cause, the reason underneath the words, right? And then we identify where is this servicing in our discovery, in our setting calls, in our outbound calls. Did it come out and did it get skipped, or did it never come out at all? Do we need to include a question earlier on to start to elicit that and bring it out? And then 3 is where in the call was it missed? So the moment should have been handled. If it was on the call and it was missed, we should have handled it there in the moment. And then we drill this, right? So when it shows at the close, what's the talk track that we need to be prepared to go through and handle and work through this objection? Then we take this process, we do this as a team, and then we put it into our playbook, and it becomes our objection talk track for that specific objection. And we do this every single week until we build an extensive playbook and a closing library for our team to constantly improve. And then when you bring on new sales reps, this library already exists. And so they can kind of just work through it, and they're starting at step 3 or 4 instead of starting at 0. So it makes their life, their ramping so much easier, and they're super impressed because you already have all the keys that they need to be successful. So like I said, I do this inside of real sales teams. So I go back for the last 30 days and I pull the report on the objections we're carrying on closing calls. And then I create a plan that we can implement to tackle them as a team preemptively. And we rinse and repeat this process. And if you do this, your training will never go stale. It'll always feel relevant. Your sales rep will want to show up to your meetings. And then they will also be more confident on the calls and they'll close more. So this whole process, it can be a little tedious, but this is the job of sales management. This is the job of sales leadership, right? Over the years, I actually have built this into an operating system. And the reason I did that is because tracking this by hand got so crazy, especially once you start dealing with large teams, multiple reps, multiple teams. And inside of my sales team operating system, it's literally one module that does both jobs, right? And it's the pillar 3, it's our end of day report module. And we have agents that are monitoring both calls and end of day reports and compiling this report on a regular basis. So the first job is compliance. Is it done? Are our end of day reports on time? And job number 2 is how can we improve, right? Are we constantly using this to get better? So I'm going to show you a quick example of what this looks like. And so this is our end of day report channel. So it has all the different reps and it's tracking their end of day reports, whether they submitted them, whether they were on time, whether they're late, whether they're missing. And so we can have a compliance layer, right? And then below this, I have our agent, which is actually monitoring this and breaking down the objections that we're seeing and hearing on the end of day reports by category. Here's an example of our end of day report Slack channel where each call was broken down. And here we're identifying what went well, where we could have improved. So the sales rep identified that I need to improve my end of call process. The mother-in-law paying tomorrow. So this is an interesting objection. So it's a decision maker objection, end of call. And the next step, follow-up call booked tomorrow. So this shows me that the sales rep is aware. This shows me that they know they probably need to work on that, but at least they tied in the next step and they got the follow-up call booked. So this is part of the sales team operating system that I built into one central location, one layer of truth for sales teams. Now, I'm not saying that you have to use this system, and I'm constantly evolving and adapting and developing it. But this whole thing, the installation that I really want you to take away today is that this whole thing can be done by hand. I've done this by hand for years up until this point, where I started developing and building coding tools with AI and whatnot, right? So if you want to run this by hand, you don't need this software. It just takes a little bit more time and a little bit more effort. And there's really 3 moves that you need. You need to add 2 fields to your end of day report if you're not doing them already. We need to have an objection item and a next step. So it's required on every call, no exceptions. And then every Friday, take 30 minutes and tally and rank. So create a spreadsheet, or if you want to do it by hand, by paper, look at all the end of day reports and start to tally and rank all the objections that you're seeing based off of rep, right? And then off of that report that you create, you're going to identify your top 3, and that becomes the drill that you have on Monday. And then if you break it down, not only by team, by rep, then you'll have the individual patterns that you can drill one-on-one. So same loop done by hand. The system is the cadence. It's not really about the software. And here's the reality, right? The whole point of all of this is a sales team that becomes complacent, starts to get lazy and starts doing the things they need to do to constantly improve, which makes it extremely difficult to scale, which typically means that we'll start to have rep churn because they're not going to continue growing and improving. So the reality is a high performance culture is not just motivation, it's a system, it's a loop that constantly happens so that the team never plateaus, right? So we're not coaching on gut feel. Training is always tied to what's killing deals, what's relevant for the team. And there's always a next objection to kill. So once we master these ones, there's another one, another one, another one. And this is why our teams never get complacent, right? So I like to say that a high performance culture is a team that never runs out of things to fix. Cheers. Hey, by the way, my name is Chris Sanchez and I build predictable, elite, and fully systemized sales teams. I've helped clients generate over $54 million in revenue and ramped countless sales reps using the approach that I call the sales team operating system. What you just watched was a real sales team OS session that I pulled from a live client. If you want to see exactly how I run, manage, and scale elite 8-figure sales teams, don't click away just yet. In this next video right here, there's another sales team OS breakdown where I go deeper into the building, coaching, managing elite reps. Go ahead and click it and enjoy. Cheers.